We are today with Eloy Van Hale, the co-founder of Hogevec, which is world renowned as the Dementia Village in the Netherlands. And it's a privilege to have Eloy join us today. So good morning in the United States, Eloy, and good
Good
afternoon
morning.
in the Netherlands for you. Late
That's true.
afternoon
Yes.
probably by now. You've been through
Mm,
a full day of work by now.
mm,
So Eloy, it's great to have you back. 2 years ago, we had the privilege to host you in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania for our Elder Care Symposium. And so I thought this would be an apropos time to catch up with you once again in light of what is going on in the United States, Europe, and the whole world related to the coronavirus healthcare pandemic. And I think our those in the United States and beyond would be interested your take on this. So welcome, and it's great to see you again. So I want to ask a question about what's going on
mhm.
in the Netherlands. Could you comment on, what's going on specifically related to your country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then we can get more in a
Yeah,
specific conversation on long-term care.
of course. Our prime minister called it an intelligent lockdown. So we're still in an intelligent lockdown, although we are opening part step by step. And so intelligent lockdown means that we are also supposed to stay at home, work from home as much as possible, which is also happening. Keep distance, social distancing, wash your hands. Um, but if you compare the Netherlands with other countries in Europe and also the United States, you can see that we have a little bit more freedom than other countries around us. But for example, nursing homes are closed since the beginning of March. Closed, that means that family is not allowed to get in, volunteers not. So that is a dramatic choice where we can discuss if this is good or bad, maybe later on. Um, but you see now that the Netherlands is opening up a little bit more. Schools are open since last week. For partly, restaurants will be open at the beginning of June. Um, and so other parts are opening up. Shops, where most of the shops were open through the whole intelligent lockdown, and compared to, for example, Italy, where everything was closed, Spain, everything was closed, France, everything was closed. So we had quite some freedom, but we are also restricted in many things. And now, at this moment, the figures in the Netherlands are very good, getting better every day. We had just enough IC beds, so we were not in big problems like you saw in Italy, in the northern part of Italy. So it was just under control. And so we should be quite happy with this status compared to other countries.
Great. If can, with regard your current position related to Hogevec, I understand, is senior advisor to Hogevec, correct?
Yes,
So
correct.
can you briefly, for those who are not familiar with Hogevec, which is the world-renowned dementia village
Mhm.
outside of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, can you briefly describe the overall concept of Hogevec
Yes,
so people will understand what it is all about?
yes. So it's very important to realize that the Hogeweg is officially a nursing home, licensed as a nursing home. But the Hogeweg, you can see the Hogeweg as the first deinstitutionalized nursing home in the world. So we went from an institution with long wards towards a neighborhood with houses and streets and all kind of services, facilities, um, where we provide long-term care for people with severe dementia. And the model is based on living together in a small household. 6, 7 residents are living together in a house, supported by professional staff to continue as much as possible with their life. And we try to, in the English word, like to involve them in daily living. And for normal daily living, you need a natural environment, a house, but also outside part of that house, so the neighborhood. So it's a sort of a community where people with severe dementia who receive long-term care until death continue with their lives in 27 houses, and a neighborhood setting where you can walk around freely, go to a restaurant, go to a theater, go to the supermarket for groceries, all with professional support.
Can you, and one of the keys I think related to COVID-19 and why I thought it was so important to get your perspective today is that you talked about those 27 individual communities where I believe there's no more than 8 residents per each community, where it's self-contained. Seven, no more than 7 residents. It's self-contained. You have its own regular staff for that one community. You have a kitchen. They do all activities together. So you're not in a room with 3 or 4 other residents. You're not in a large area where everyone is congregated or cohorted together.
Not in a like you find in institutions.
Right.
So it works like a family with 6 or 7 family members, where you cook, eat, watch television, and go out for a walk.
You talked about the Netherlands response and current situation with the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about specifically Hogevik, the Dementia Village's response, and where are we today into the 3rd month of the so-called pandemic? How's are things going at Hogevik?
So since this week, it's going very well. We have only 1 resident with coronavirus left, you could say. And we expect that, I'm not sure if it's he or she, will move back to her house at the end of this week. So we had some coronavirus, and also for some residents, it was the last push to their death. That's correct, but many also recovered, or many people recovered too. And in some parts of the Hoogwijk, you could not notice that there was corona in the neighborhood because life just went on. But at a certain moment, we had a serious problem. There was a virus brought in by staff into the neighborhood. And at that moment, we could close the houses, the 27 houses, and really kept everybody separate from others, which is not part of the model, which we'd not like to do, but was necessary due to the virus.
Do you think the layout of Hogevik, in which there are 27 separate housing units where no more than 7 residents, do you think in retrospect, at least to date, or knock wood, so to speak, that the layout of the Dementia Village helped minimize the spread of COVID-19 into your buildings?
Absolutely. Into the buildings is different because you bring it into the neighborhood and brought in by probably staff.
Well, into the village as a whole.
So brought in the village is probably by staff because there was no virus inside. But when virus is inside the neighborhood, it's definitely easier to contain because you have 27 separate places you can lock down from other parts. So if it's corona-free, it's easier to keep it corona-free if you don't allow staff to wander around and visit all the houses. So there are many other reasons why you get coronavirus inside, or how you spread it or not. So you must, it's not the building only, it's also the protocols, how you cooperate, how you work, how you distance in a neighborhood. But there are many more opportunities than institutions where you have big wards, corridors with 30 people, where people dine together every evening, etc. Here it's always a small group of 6 or 7 residents and 2 staff members. So it gives a lot of opportunities to keep the majority safe and to focus on the cohort that has a problem with the virus.
As you know, from our conversations, as well as reading about what's going on in the United States, nursing home and assisted living deaths have been a serious issue. For example, in New Jersey, as we've already discussed, approximately 50% of all COVID-19 related deaths have occurred in either assisted living or more prominently nursing homes throughout the state. Can you talk about what short term and maybe project long term, which I know is difficult because we're still within the pandemic. It's just arguably maybe the first third of the beginning of this pandemic. Can you talk about maybe some lessons learned about how can we, at least those in the United States, look at maybe what the dementia village concept is and how more prominently we can incorporate into layout, and then maybe longer term, what do you see as the future of long-term care in relation to this current pandemic, and what improvements do you need to see going forward?
I think it's always important to look at perspective. So it's not only the building, it's not only enough PPA, but if you look at the layout of the building, it's definitely very helpful. That's the starting point. But instructions and protocols and good hygiene regulations are even also essential. But it's definitely, and maybe that's why also in the Netherlands, where small scale living, what we do in the Hoogweg, small households, is quite common now in the Netherlands. We were the first 25 years ago, but it's quite common that you see that the spread is not that worse as in the United States. And so the smaller household model gives many positive outcomes, easier to contain if you work with fixed team members, not sharing different houses as a workplace, because that's also a problem in the United States, but for locations. So if you work like that, it's definitely good. And I think, looking at the Hoogweg, we don't need that many adjustments. I think we are prepared for the next or the rest of the pandemic. It's because of the smaller scale.
But
there's
I guess
definitely a smaller risk.
Well, you've been to the United States. We had you. You've been to you've visited some long-term care communities already in the United States. You've heard from different stakeholders about what the situation is regarding specifically nursing homes and long-term care. Let me ask you this: this is a big question. Do you think the United States is prepared?
I think, but that's not only about this pandemic, but in general, that we need to change the total way we look at elderly living in facilities. We need to deinstitutionalize, and by deinstitutionalizing, you can reduce the risk by allowing people to live in a more normal way in apartments, in small houses. That reduces the risks for virus, but also norovirus, but also adds a lot of quality of life. So I think, and that's what I do now for more than 20 years, I think we should go definitely much further in deinstitutionalizing the whole care. And so that is a big step, and it takes another 2-3 decades, but really the old-fashioned institutions with long wards and shared bedrooms and so, I think the future customer will not accept that anymore. So, and if we stop with sharing bedrooms. And if we allow people also in the last phase of life to live a normal life, you can also reduce the risks of a pandemic like this. So
Eloy,
it's not only the dementia village. It's much more. The dementia village itself is not the solution. We should continue with deinstitutionalizing.
Eloy, that is a discussion to be continued, no doubt. That's a very important discussion, and I hope that you are able to share your very important viewpoint going forward. And we're going to have you back, hopefully, in a more formalized format
Yes.
going forward. So, Eloy, you're an inspiration to many people, and keep up the great work. What your concept is for Hogevec and the Dementia Village really needs to catch on, not just the United States, but worldwide, because I know that you've talked about quality of life, and comes foremost. But maybe the good outcome, if you want to call it that, from the coronavirus pandemic is that the time has come to change the way we think about long-term care. Maybe not really, maybe the outcome would be quality of life. Maybe the impetus may be COVID, and maybe the result would be improved quality of life. So I know that was not your intent, but maybe the result can be that. So
I'm sure that this is a trigger, a positive stimuli for many people to think, what were we doing in the past? How can we improve the lives for the elderly? And so we need to change. And so in that way, maybe it's helpful. This tragedy is helpful to improve the lives for the future older people.
So,
absolutely.
So Eloy, thank you so much for your time. Well, this discussion will be continued. Best of luck to you. And I'm glad everything's doing relatively well in the Netherlands and Hogevec. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jerry.